you remember about your high school language experience? You probably remember conjugating verbs, memorizing vocabulary. You may have even had some fun cultural days where you broke apart a piñata or cooked some crepes. Now let me ask you this. Do you still speak the language that you studied in high school? And if you're a student, go home and ask your parents, do they still speak the same language that they studied when they were in high school? I would bet that unless they use the language for their job, they probably no longer speak the language. So why study a language, right? Culture is traditionally taught in service to language in the language classroom. But I would argue that language should be taught in service to culture, and that culture should be a central focus of the language classroom. Cultural fluidity should be an essential, enduring outcome of every language classroom. Now, what do I mean by cultural fluidity? Cultural fluidity is the ability to navigate between cultures comfortably, even if you're not familiar with that particular culture. So how can you do that in the language classroom? Well, you need to step outside the walls of the language classroom and actually connect with the people who speak the language. It's not enough to sit in the classroom and conjugate verbs all day. You'll be happy to know if you're my student. So technology affords us many different ways that we can connect with people outside the classroom without even leaving the classroom. We can Skype with people around the world. We can collaborate on projects on Google Drive. But I would recommend that we actually physically leave the walls of the classroom and that we participate in service learning projects in our local communities with all the different great cultures that our cities have to offer, that we take trips and practice speaking the language with people in your local community, and if you're so fortunate to be able to do so, to travel outside the country and participate in a global exchange. And as you are experiencing these other cultures and seeking these other experiences, we always need to really seek to understand the other culture, not just to be a passive recipient of the culture, but to actively seek to understand how their culture works. About 25 years ago, I took about 4 years of Japanese, and I would love to say that I can still speak Japanese, but I can't. I could probably string together a few words, maybe form a sentence like, do you want to go play? Very useful. But one thing that I do remember about studying Japanese was the concept of UCHI versus SOTO. UCHI are the people in your inner circle, the people who are closest to you, while SOTO are the people outside your inner circle, or the outsiders, if you will. And I'm always struck by this natural human inclination that we have to other people. And it's not just in Japanese grammar where we other people. I feel like we do that a lot. And with this idea of othering, there comes this idea of that there's some sort of hierarchy of cultures, when in reality, no culture is superior or inferior to another. There are just other cultures. And as we seek these experiences and these connections with these other cultures, it's not enough simply to tolerate another culture or not judge another culture. We need to move to actually accepting the culture and eventually moving on to value and embrace that other culture. And obviously that doesn't happen overnight. We need to really believe that there are other ways of viewing and doing that are equally valid as what we have in our own culture. So should we stop conjugating verbs in the language classroom? Of course not. Language is a means to an end, and it's the best path to becoming more culturally fluid. One thing that I would argue is that the choice of language that you study is less important and less relevant than the fact that you study another language and another culture. If you study one language and one culture deeply enough, you should be able to adapt to other cultures as well. So, are you beyond hope if you're an adult sitting here? Certainly not. We're never too old to grow and to learn and to experience other cultures. So what can we do if we're no longer in the language classroom? I would recommend that you seek experiences and connections within your own communities. And one great way of doing that is to make friends with people from another culture. Really think about who your friends are right now. I would bet that they look a lot like you, they think a lot like you, they probably act a lot like you, and probably share a very similar, if not the same, culture. And one very simple way to seek an experience in another culture is to make friends with another culture, with a person from another culture, of course. And as you experience this new friendship, I would encourage you to really observe that person's culture, to listen with an open mind and an open heart, and to resist the urge to believe that our culture is the only culture. So why even bother trying to become culturally fluid? It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So is it worth it? Well, I believe there are three main reasons that we should all seek to become more culturally fluid. The first is of a practical nature. In our multicultural society, in our ever-shrinking global world, it's going to be a real asset, if it isn't already, to be able to connect with other cultures and to adapt to other cultures. The second reason is of a more personal level, is of a more personal nature, and that is in my own life. I have experienced such happiness, such great personal fulfillment and satisfaction by traveling all over the world, living in other countries, making friends with people all over the world who speak different languages and speaking to them in their language. And I would have never had the same life or experience that I have now had I remained inside my personal cultural cocoon. The third reason is probably the most important, but you may think it's a little overly optimistic, and that is world peace. World peace, I believe, can be achieved one friendship, one relationship at a time. It's far too easy to harm someone that we consider as other. And if we make friends with someone from another culture, not only will we appreciate that friend, we'll appreciate his or her culture as well. And once we appreciate one other culture, we'll appreciate many other cultures as well. So if we begin to start changing our actions, making new friends, seeking experiences, interacting with people of other cultures and countries, we'll begin to change our thoughts. And if our thoughts are more positive, then our actions will become more positive. Thank you.